Hi everyone. Um, I've been thinking about this for a while. A few years back, after Zach died, I started writing a book. I wrote a book. I never finished it. It's still unfinished, and the reason I wrote it is my life has been very interesting, to say the least. I've had an interesting life, and I'm a Christian, and I wanted to, get my testimony out there, because the Lord says we overcome by our testimony. And so I've been thinking about it, and I decided just to do some videos, that it might be easier. Anyway, so I'm going to be looking at my notes because it's kind of long. And 4 years ago, I had an aneurysm and had brain surgery. So I still kind of, forget things. And, and I've got other health issues now I'm dealing with too. I'll be 60 this year. But anyway, I just hope that this blesses someone, and that they can take something away from it and learn something, and just come to the Lord, because he's been so good to me. He's been so good to me. I should have died 4 years ago. I shouldn't be here. And I'm still here. So anyway, I'm going to start off with the Bible verse, because this Bible verse, when I first came to the Lord, I had a dream, and I dreamt that there was this rope. I was in this big storm, and there was this rope hanging down, and I was hanging onto this rope, and the Lord brought me down out of the storm clouds, but I was still hanging over the water, and I was hanging onto this rope, and well, it might have been actually the opposite. I was in the water and got pulled up and was still under the clouds. I think that's the way it went. It's been a long time. But anyway, this verse reminds me of that dream. It's Psalm 18:16. He sent from above. He took me. He drew me out of many waters. And that's how I feel about my life. So I want to tell you the story. It was kind of rough at first when the Lord brought me to him, because he showed me a lot of things. I went through a lot of experiences. Sometimes people think that when you become a Christian, it all just comes easier. No, it doesn't. The devil really, really goes after you. He wants to kill you and destroy you. And you start to see it, in your life. But anyway, let's start off. And this is a cool story. When I was little, we lived in this old house, and it didn't have running water, and it was in Minnesota, and I had to go out to the bathroom in 40 below weather. Well, actually, Mom did put a pail under the sink, which was pretty gross. But it was this old house, and we had this room, us kids, and my bed was facing this window, this big old window, and outside of my window there was like a tree or something, and I would get really scared, especially if it got windy or stormy, and that tree would kind of brush against the window. And I remember being just this little girl and looking out the window, and my mom and dad brought me up at a Lutheran church, which I'm thankful for, because they did teach me the basics about, Bible stories and all of that. But anyway, I remember looking out that window and just being terrified. And then I remember thinking about the Lord, and this peace and this warmth came over me, and I just felt all snuggled up in my bed, and I just went right to sleep. But I'll never forget that, because I felt like that was the presence of the Lord just comforting me when I was a little girl. Um, and I had kind of a rough childhood. There was a lot of drinking in Minnesota, a lot of alcoholism, and there probably still is. So I grew up with that. Almost everybody I knew grew up with that. It's just something we all lived with. And we can probably talk about that a different time. But I had good parents. I was thankful for my parents. They were good to me, took good care of me. Didn't have a lot of money, but it was good. So anyway, that was my first experience with the Lord. Then I grew older and, you know, got married, had my first son really young, and that's a whole nother story. And then went on and got remarried and had a couple more kids. And you know, was in that life where, you know, everybody you know has kids, and you've got the cousins and the, you know, the aunts and the uncles and everything. And anyway, at one point, and I'm not gonna say who, but there was some close family members whose children got molested by a neighbor boy. And it was very, very traumatic for me because I love kids. I do. And so that was really hard. There wasn't, you know, really anything that could be done about it. And I don't really want to get too far into that, but it really drove me to seek the Lord. I needed the Lord so bad, and just other things in my life, you know, things that were difficult. And anyway, I found this little church. It was just right uptown. And if you're watching this and you know me, you'll know the people, you'll know the church. And they were the sweetest old couple. They were just old couple. I started going there, and they had the pastor was doing a Bible study in Revelation, which I highly recommend that you read the book of Revelation. I believe we're very close to the end times. Very, very close. And we're in the end times, but I mean, I'm talking about the end times. Anyway, we went there, and it was just me and my kids who went there. My husband, I don't know, he just wasn't ready or something. He did his thing, and I took the kids to church. The only thing that was kind of hard about that church was being an older couple. They were into very religious things. So like, I came in, they started preaching on, you know, you can't wear makeup, you know, shouldn't be wearing jewelry, all these lists of rules, like women should be in dresses, you should grow your hair long. So I grew my hair long. I quit wearing jewelry except my wedding ring. I quit wearing makeup. I didn't get into the whole dress thing, although I did wear dresses to church. But they were just sweet people, and I felt that, and I, you know, felt the sweetness of the church and how much they loved the Lord. And I also met another family there. There was a lady and her husband, and it was so cool because they had like 6 kids. And then I had my kids, and some of the kids were close in age, and they would play. And so that was cool. And, you know, we did like Bible little programs with the kids and stuff. And everything was going along pretty good. I got baptized at that little church. The pastor baptized me out at the lake, where my family had, you know, property. We did it out there, and it was beautiful. It was fun. the only thing that I can say was negative, and I believe it's from all of the, in fact, I'm pretty sure it is, from getting into a place with all of those rules, you know, where it kind of felt more like works in a way than I guess that's the only way I can explain it. And I'm going to read a few Bible verses, but I started to have really bad anxiety there, just terrible anxiety, and I didn't know what it was. I thought I was going crazy. It was debilitating. Like I would just freeze or hold my breath mid-sentence. And it was a really rough time. But I didn't really know what was going on. And then the pastor died, and pretty soon the church just kind of fell apart. But I do want to read you these Bible verses about kind of, I guess, what the Lord showed me later. And Romans 3:20, therefore by thy deeds of the law there shall no flesh be justified in his sight, for by the law is the knowledge of sin. Galatians 3:11, but that no man is justified by the law in the sight of God. It is evident, for the just shall live by faith. And I really think just the fact that I was trying so hard to follow the law and follow the Lord by rules, I was missing it. And I was getting into this anxiety and all of this trauma, type stuff. And there was a lot of things in my childhood that I needed to deal with already. But anyway, the pastor died and the church just kind of fell apart. But my friend, she took her kids, because she had 6 and she'd been homeschooling them, and I homeschooled my kids, which I'm really thankful I did. I'm really, that was a precious time, and I'm really glad I did it. I got to teach my kids to read, and it was wonderful. I would take them on we called them field trips, and I would take them like to history places, because the time that I needed to teach them in school didn't take as long as like sending them to a public school. So it went really fast, and we just had a lot of fun. So anyway, I followed my friend out to this place because it was getting harder as the kids got a little bigger. My son was a little bit, he didn't want to sit, and I'm not sure, maybe he had some ADHD or something. He was a little bit difficult. Wonderful child though. Just a sweetheart. But he didn't want to do his schoolwork, and a little stubborn that way. So we went out. I followed my friend out to this church and school, and it was really great. At first, it was really great at first, and the Lord, it started out, she invited me to this special thing they had where they had these evangelists coming, and I went, and there was a whole bunch of people there, and they were all singing and praising the Lord, and you could feel the presence of the Lord. You could feel, I felt his presence, and it was just beautiful. And then after that, I started going out there and bringing the kids, and I decided to enroll them in school, and I decided to help with the school because it was a 30-mile drive just to get them there. So I thought, well, if I go out and help school, help them at the school, and, it'll help both of us. And so I did that, and it was great. I love the kids. I have a lot of good memories with those kids. I wrote them all poems one Valentine's Day about their little personalities, because I got to know their personalities. But anyway, during that time, revival was happening in Brownsville, and I don't know, if you're a Christian, you're probably gonna know something about that. And it was a really exciting time because the Lord was doing works. And so that was all new to me. I mean, I in that little church before, they were Pentecostals, so I did get, some of that, and but it was for the most part, all new to me. But I was so excited, I just wanted, I just wanted the Lord so much, and there was moments. I remember there was a deliverance moment where I had a dream about it sounds silly, but I believe it was from the Lord. I had a dream about a kitty, and the kitty was stuck in a bottle of alcohol, and it was dying. And I remember pulling this kitty out, and I was trying to save this kitty, and I just, in my dream, I was like, oh, poor little kitty, And anyway, we were at a prayer group. I don't know if it was a Wednesday night or what at the church. They would have prayer on Wednesday nights, and I would go to that too. And it came up. I told him about the dream and stuff, and the pastor, he ended up praying over me, and I was on the floor just shaking. And I believe God delivered me from something, whatever it was. He delivered me from something that night. And there was times like when I was in the church service, I felt the fire of God. I mean, I felt, I can't even explain it. It was amazing, but I felt the fire of God, and it was wonderful. It was, I got free of the religion. I started, wearing makeup and just doing normal type things again, so the Lord freed me of that. And things were going good. And then at one point, and I'm going to just say, the Lord takes things very seriously, especially if you're praying and you're seeking the Lord and you're fasting. The Lord hears the prayers of his people. And there were people out in this church that were very good people. I want to say that. Very good people. But on with the story. So at one point they decided to do this Daniel fast because there was these revivals going on in Brownsville, and they wanted a revival at their church, and everybody, I still am praying for revival just in our country and everything. But so they decided to do this Daniel fast, and it was a 40-day fast. And then you could go along with it or not. And I have a hard time fasting. I always have. I did, kind of participate where I could and how I could. But they were the main head of the church, the pastor, the head teacher, because it was a school there too, and the family who started it. I guess I kind of consider them, the main people. They were really hardcore going into this fast, like, only like shakes or, fruit juices or whatever. They were doing this. And about halfway through the fast, something happened. And all I remember is the head teacher and his wife, they came to the school church and asked for prayer, and they were just like devastated. Something horrible had happened, but they didn't want to talk about it. So we prayed for them, and I just at that time felt like I didn't really want to know what it was, so I wouldn't let people tell me. I figured if the Lord wanted me to know, he would tell me. And at that time I was also getting like dreams and stuff from the Lord. Like I dreamt that when my grandma got sick and died, I dreamt that before she fell, I had a dream she fell and that she never got back up again. And sure enough, she fell and she ended up going in the nursing home, and then she died a little bit later. So the Lord was the Lord was, starting to speak to me, and different things, and like Bible verses would really pop out at me, and that type of thing, where I felt like the Lord was speaking to me. And anyway, so they came in for prayer, and after that, everything in the church changed. You could just feel the atmosphere. It changed. It was so tense. There was bickering and stuff going on under the surface. One of my friends ended up moving out from her husband's house into the pastor's house. And so something was going on with her, and I didn't really know what it was, but nothing was the way it had been. And then I don't know if it was at that time or before that time, and I didn't think about it, but that friend that moved into the pastor's house, or next to his house, or whatever, she was just a really neat lady. I really loved her. And she had told me that, well, she would go help the head teacher, because the head teacher and his wife, they had like 8 kids, a whole bunch of kids. And she would go help them, because she only had a few girls, I think she had maybe 3 girls. And they were teenagers. And so she would go help her friend. And but she had told me at times that she thought I had a problem with rebellion, which I don't know. Maybe I did. Maybe I know that I had trouble with authority, because I had been beaten down by authority in my life with having alcoholism in the family. And we'll talk about that later. But anyway, she had told me that when she would get really upset and stuff, that they would hold her down and pray over her. And I thought that was kind of odd. But I didn't really think much of it, because I really loved her and I respected her. And, she was trying to be obedient and submissive, and the way you're supposed to be. And that is true. I've learned a lot about that since, but maybe we'll talk about that at the end. So anyway, I started to kind of feel like I was getting words for the church, and I think I got off on kind of a wrong, I know I did. I got to the point, because it was so overwhelming for me to hear from the Lord, and I know there were times I was hearing from the Lord, but you start to kind of get in this where you maybe think you're hearing from the Lord more than you actually are, type of thing. And maybe it was from being around people who were so sure they were hearing from the Lord. And of course, I was always in awe of them, the pastor or whatever. And anyway, I ended up going in and talking to the pastor and telling him what I felt like the Lord had showed me. And it was a prophecy type things. And the weird thing was, before I ended up leaving, he ended up like thinking I was hearing from the Lord, and I don't really know what that was all about, but I finally just felt like I couldn't handle it anymore. So one day I left. I took my kids, and I took them out to the car. And on the way out to the car, the pastor and the head teacher come running after me. They pushed me to the ground, and they started to pray over me. And I was just bawling. And I got up, and I drove the kids home, crying, and all of that. And the Lord, and I do feel like the Lord did give me this verse. I'm going to read it. It was Psalm 55:9. Destroy, O Lord, and divide their tongues, for I have seen violence and strife in the city. And that's exactly what I had seen. I had seen violence and strife in the city. Around this time, actually, before that happened, before that day, I had a dream. I had a dream about a carnival ride, and I believe this was from the Lord too. But there was like these big stairs, and I was climbing these stairs, and there was this big storm. It was all cloudy and dark, and I'm climbing up the stairs, and I'm all excited because I'm going to go on this carnival ride. And halfway up the stairs, I meet my friend, the one I followed out there with her kids, and we passed her and went up a little further, and I met these wicked men. And at some point, I don't know what happened, but they said they were shutting down, and I don't know if it was somebody said it or if it was just the impression I got, but they were shutting down the ride because of the storm. So they were shutting down the ride, and I ran into these wicked men, and they grabbed me, and I woke up. And I felt like it was from the Lord because of everything that was going on at that church. I didn't really know what it all meant at the time, but anyway, after that day, I never went back. I never went back to that church again. Not after that. 2 weeks later, in the papers, it said that the head teacher was charged with molesting teenage girls. And it finally all came out that that friend of mine who was staying with the pastors at the pastor's house, it was one of her girls that had been molested. So I think the horror of it all, the horror of, what happened before with me, with family, and then what happened with her. Here was this woman who was, just trying to serve the Lord and helping her friend who is married to the head teacher. The head teacher is taking out her daughters and molesting them during youth group or whatever, wherever the situation is. It was just almost, it was more than I could handle. It really was. And then my grandma died. Remember I told you the dream about my grandma? She died right around that time too. And I ended up having a nervous breakdown. I'm going to just be honest about that because that's what happened. I had a nervous breakdown. And I was really confused and devastated, probably from what had gone on with the church. I felt very disillusioned. I knew that it wasn't the Lord. I knew that all that stuff, that bad stuff, wasn't the Lord. I knew that. But I was afraid of church, and I was afraid of the people, and how could they do these things? And so I had a nervous breakdown. I ended up hitchhiking to Reno, Nevada from Minnesota. And God protected me the whole way. He really did. He really did. My friend gave me a ride to Brainerd, and from there, I caught a ride with a man who took me to St. Cloud. From there, I sat in a gas station, it was like a truck stop. So I sat there, and all of a sudden, I saw this man, and I decided just to go ask him for a ride because I knew he was a truck driver. not that this matters, but he was a black man, and I'd never really been around black men, but I just felt like go ask him to give you a ride, and so I did. And he said I don't normally give rides, but this is my last day. Tomorrow he was going to be done. It was his last day of work. He was moving to another job, so he gave me a ride. And he was heading towards Reno, but he wasn't going all the way. So he gave me a ride, and we talked, and he was just very sweet and nice to me. But he got on his CB radio, and he was trying to find me a safe ride the rest of the way to my cousin's house. And so he found this lady finally, and it was very interesting because she had a car that she had defaulted on the payments for her car, and she was from the area where my family was from, and she knew my family. She knew them. Because she decided to give me a ride and started talking to me, and she knew my family, or my husband's family. And anyway, so she gave me a ride the rest of the way to my cousin's house. And I got there, and my cousin I don't think he knew what to think of me. but I love my cousin, and he's gone now. He died a few years back, but I made it, and the Lord protected me, and nothing happened to me, and that alone was it was a miracle. And I was really messed up, because after what happened at the church, and I don't think my husband ever believed this, but it's true. After what had happened, I felt so guilty, because I was the first Christian, in my family, and I understood, what that meant, that I was this Christian that the Lord had put in this family. But stuff had been hard at home, and I got in my mind, and this wasn't the Lord, but I got in my mind that if I didn't leave, my family wouldn't be saved, which is totally crazy. I know it is now. But that's what my thinking was at the time. Anyway, my aunt, Sandy, I need to tell you more stories about them too, but I was always really close to my mom and my cousins. She was just such a sweet lady. So she's still a sweet lady. I love her. She, came to visit me and stuff. Well, after a few days at my cousin's house, I decided that I was going to hitchhike on to Los Angeles. Well, my aunt found out, and she had the police come and pick me up. And I'm so thankful she did. So she had the police come and pick me up, and put me in the psych ward, which I needed to be. I needed to be there. And anyway, they started giving me medicine. It was not a fun place to be. It wasn't fun to be locked up. That's the closest I've ever been to jail. I did get a ride in the police car. I did get handcuffed. And they started giving me medicine and started talking to the doctor. That was hard, because he was thinking I was psychotic because I was talking about the Lord and the Lord speaking to me. He didn't understand the Lord does speak to people. He does, and non-Christians still think that's crazy, but it's not. Although there were things, obviously, I was thinking that weren't right, that weren't from the Lord. And then finally I remember one day in there after a couple of weeks, I felt like the Lord said, you need to repent. You need to turn from this, or you're gonna be stuck here. And I did. I did repent. And my husband came and got me. I mean, I think he thought I left him because I didn't love him, and that wasn't why I left him. I was all screwed up in the head. And I don't think I ever got to, but I felt like I was, the Christian who had been put to minister to this family, and I had let them all down by going to this church where they were molesting children, and it really, really hit me hard. Anyway, that leads me to a couple of the last verses. So I received correction too. I received correction. And that leads me to this verse, Psalm 94:12. Blessed is the man whom thou chastenest, O Lord, and teachest him out of thy law. The Lord he's brought me through so many things, and I know that I probably need to come on and, go to the next thing that I need to talk about. And there's been a lot of spiritual abuse going on in churches that's coming out and being made public now. And I think that's partly why I'm doing this too, because I know what that's like. I went through that. In this situation was the worst. After that, I honestly was afraid to go to church. I was terrified. I didn't trust myself. I did trust the Lord, but I didn't trust myself, and my husband, he just wasn't in a place to be the leader in the family, like men are supposed to be. He just wasn't there. And we get along great now. We're not married anymore. And that's a story for another day. But what I want to say is, if you've ever been to a church where there's spiritual abuse going on, whether it's verbal, where they're just making you feel like saying something that isn't the Lord about you and making you feel bad, or if you're actually getting pushed to the ground like I was and prayed over, or whatever, the abuse may be that you've felt, please don't give up on God. Don't give up on the Lord, because that's not him. It's not. He's so good. He's been so good. And we'll have more talks. We'll do this again. But don't give up. The Lord, you have to remember that it was the religious people of his own people that he struggled with, and that killed him. And even now it's kind of hard. I'm just very picky about what I watch, but I'll leave you with this thought. And it's Matthew 23:2-3. The scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. All therefore whatsoever they bid you observe, that observe and do, but do not ye after their works, for they say and do not. The Lord understands. So please, there are good churches out there. I did find good churches later. And we'll go into that story another time. But the Lord's been good to me. And serving the Lord is not boring. Not at all. Not at all. Anyway, it's my hope that all my family would be saved, that they'd be ready for the end times. Um, I'd like everyone to escape the tribulation, which I believe is coming soon.